You know those days when faith feels heavier than it should? When you're trying to believe, trying to pray, but it just feels like your words disappear into the silence? It's like doubt is louder than trust, and deep down, you start wondering, is my faith enough? Is God still here? It's hard to admit, but the truth is that for many of us, faith isn't always easy. There are times when believing feels like a struggle, when God's promises seem distant, and the surrounding reality seems to contradict everything we hold on to. If you've ever felt that way, I want to remind you, you're not alone. Faith has never been about being perfect or never doubting. It's about continuing, even when it feels impossible. Finding faith when everything seems to be falling apart isn't easy. I remember a specific time in my life when something felt impossible. My mother was battling a serious illness, and the doctors didn't give much hope. I prayed every day, but it felt like my faith was wearing thin. Believing that things could change seemed nearly impossible. Fear and doubt began to creep in. I found myself wondering, is God listening? Does my prayer make any difference? Those thoughts taught me something important. Faith isn't about having all the answers or never wavering. It's about holding on, even when everything feels uncertain. I often think about Peter walking on water. That passage always moves me. Peter's courage to step out of the boat is remarkable, but what truly strikes me is the moment he began to sink. He saw the wind, the waves, and fear overtook him. Even so, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" And Jesus immediately reached out to him. What amazes me about this story is that Jesus didn't wait for Peter to have perfect faith or overcome his fear. He pulled him back up. It makes me think of the times I've felt like Peter, focusing on the waves instead of fixing my eyes on Jesus. I'm also inspired by Abraham's story. God promised that Abraham would be the father of many nations, yet years went by, and nothing seemed to happen. Abraham had moments of doubt, made mistakes, but he kept believing. And in the right time, God fulfilled his promise. That story reminds me that faith doesn't have to be linear or flawless. It can waver, but God remains faithful, even when we are not. Whether it's like Peter or Abraham, these stories remind me that God understands our weaknesses. He knows when we're afraid or feel small in the face of challenges. And still, He chooses to act, not because of who we are, but because of who He is. Maybe you're facing something now that feels impossible. It could be a loss, a sudden life change, or even a dream that feels out of reach. These are the moments when faith feels hard, when God's silence feels louder. But faith isn't about having unshakable confidence every day. It's about continuing to take steps, no matter how small, toward Him. A friend of mine went through a similar time. She owned a business she loved, but it began to crumble due to financial difficulties. She prayed, but it seemed like nothing was changing. One day, she told me, I started to realize I was waiting for a big answer from God when He was already showing me small signs every day. That stuck with me because it made me realize how often we wait for something grand while God's presence is in the details. Jesus reminds us of this in Matthew 17:20. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, "Move from here to there," and it will move. What's beautiful about this passage is that Jesus doesn't demand enormous faith. He says that even a small, sincere faith is enough to move mountains. That's God's grace. He works with the little we have and does extraordinary things. So, if your faith feels fragile today, that's okay. It's not about having perfect faith, but trusting that God can do great things with the little you offer. And that's something that brings me immense comfort. I want to invite you to reflect. What's been making your faith waver? What are the waves you're focusing on? Maybe now is the time to fix your eyes on Jesus again. Not because it will solve everything instantly, but because in trusting Him, we find the strength to move forward. Faith doesn't erase difficulties, but it gives us something more. The assurance that we're not alone. God is with us, even when it's hard to believe, and He is faithful to sustain us, even when our faith feels small. If you've made it this far, I imagine you're searching for the strength to keep going. Maybe you feel tired, like you've done everything you can, yet things still seem so difficult. I know how that feels. Faith isn't about having unwavering strength all the time. It's about continuing to walk forward, even when everything inside you says to stop. I want to encourage you to take a moment and reflect. What has been making your faith waver lately? What has been draining your energy and causing doubt? There's no shame in acknowledging these feelings. In fact, recognizing them is the first step to allowing God to work in those areas. If you can, try something simple today. Take a moment of silence and ask yourself, what are the waves I've been focusing on? What has been pulling my attention away from God? Write it down if you feel it would help. Then try something else. For every worry you list, write something you can still be grateful for. It might seem small, but gratitude has a special way of reminding us that God is still present, even when life feels unclear. Faith isn't something you have to carry alone. If you feel adrift, talk to God. Your prayer doesn't have to be long or eloquent. Just something honest, like, God, I'm tired, but I want to trust you. The beauty of faith is that it doesn't need to be perfect. As Jesus reminded us, even a mustard seed of faith is enough. And maybe today, the small step of faith you need is simply believing that God is still with you, even when everything feels hard. Remember, you don't have to carry it all on your own. God is the one who sustains, renews, and strengthens. Take that small step and trust that He'll be there for the next one. Because He always is. I know that when faith feels difficult, it can feel like walking through a tunnel without seeing the light at the end. The sense of being alone and without answers can be overwhelming, but I want to remind you of something important. You don't need to have all the answers right now. God doesn't expect your faith to be perfect. He just wants your heart, exactly as it is. I love a quote by C.S. Lewis that says, "Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted in spite of your changing moods." This reminds me that faith isn't dependent on how we feel, but on whom we believe. If your faith feels small today, I encourage you to take a step, even if it's a hesitant one. Start where you are. Maybe that means pausing for a moment and saying, God, I don't know how to keep going, but I want to trust you. It doesn't have to be perfect, just sincere. Remember, faith isn't about never wavering. It's about always returning to the one who is our strength. God doesn't abandon us in our moments of doubt. He walks with us, even when we don't. Realize it. As it says in Psalm 34:18, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So take a deep breath, quiet your mind for a moment, and allow yourself to feel His presence. The journey may be hard, but you are not alone. God is here, ready to sustain you, and He has something beautiful planned for you, something far greater than you can imagine. Just trust Him.